Good evening, St. Louis, and welcome in to Boots on the Ground on STL Sports Central. I am one of your hosts, Matthew Rocchio. That is Will Bratton. He's live now from the good old state of Mississippi. He's back at school, but still bringing you Boots on the Ground every week here because we got plenty of St. Louis City SC news to break down from training from this past week on the pitch, and a lot of things happening even off the pitch as the mid-season transfer window continues to churn. Will, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. It's been stormy here in Mississippi this evening, so I've been soaking it in. Obviously, for those who don't know, I'm studying meteorology. I'm studying weather, so it's always nice when I get some storms to welcome me back into the great state of Mississippi down here in Starkville. So good to be back. But it was a great summer, and I'm a little bummed to not be down at Energizer Park, 3-4 times a week. That's unfortunate.
Yeah,
but,
well,
but it is good to be back at school. One more year to go.
Yeah, get that education, young blood. That's what we like to see from Will. Will, in his senior year down at Mississippi State, we don't like to talk a lot about the Mississippi State factor because this is a Mizzou household where I'm at, and there's no need to talk about that Mississippi State stuff. We won't get into that. We've successfully navigated our SEC rivalry this entire St. Louis soccer season, so we will continue to avoid that. We will talk about the good things, although
talk about what we have in common.
Yes, exactly. Right out of the gate, though, we are going to talk about something that might be making people a little bit nervous because there was last week the Instagram post from Roman Burki. He was in LA with his agent and at Nobu in Los Angeles, which is obviously very good food. If you can find yourself in one of the cities with a Nobu, do it. It's fantastic. I recommend doing the Wagyu because that's my personal favorite. So he's in Nobu. He's with his agent. He's with his fiance. He's got this entire little, his entire posse around him making decisions. And that sent St. Louis City fans into a little bit of a tizzy.
Yeah.
And
you're always going to have some sort of, assumptions that are going to come in your mind when you see a player with their agent on a trip. Like that screams something's coming, right? It could also equally scream we're celebrating signing an extension with St. Louis. It can mean anything, but it typically implies that something has happened, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing for St. Louis fans, but obviously there's been a lot of stir around what's going to happen with him and teams like Chicago, not with Burki's fiance being based out of Chicago. And, of course, the children being there as well. That's always a pull factor. Although I'm not sure that really Chicago can pay him, to be honest with you.
And they don't. They got their goalie. I don't think they really want to pay him either. Yeah. To your point. That wouldn't really surprise me. We do have to add something new into this discussion because Roman Burki did do an interview with a German-based publication, SPOX. I'm gonna pronounce it Spox because that's all I'm really seeing from it. But SPOX, whatever you want to call it. And Jochen Titmar was the one who actually interviewed Roman Burki, and we're just gonna throw up that interview so you guys can take a little look-see here, so we can kind of see. Oh nope, we lost Will. Sorry, Will. I didn't mean to kick you out there. Let's just because these are really the big things. Right here that jumps out to everybody when you talk about these quotes here. Obviously, a lot of the article, because it's with a German publication, is about his departure from Borussia Dortmund, the changes in coaches that led to him getting demoted, how he felt about the demotion, all the different transfer rumors and almost transfers that happened. He almost went to Atletico Madrid. He was very close to going to Galatasaray in Turkey. These things all fell apart. He didn't want to go to a lower league in France. And now apparently very happy in St. Louis. Asked by Jochen, your contract in St. Louis now runs till the end of 2025. You'll be 35 by then. How long do you want to play? Obviously, all this, by the way, translated in German, so there's going to be a little bit of some movement of what's being said. And this was Roman Burki's response. As long as I feel good and my performance is good, fortunately, I don't have any major physical problems. I don't want to feel like I can't reach the ball anymore because I become too immobile or slow to react. We're in good contact with the club to find a solution. So as a continuation, this is the question again, of your career in USA more likely, or is it a return to Europe also possible? Not really. I like it here. We're currently in talks with several MLS clubs, but since I feel very comfortable here and really like the people, St. Louis is my priority. How good does it feel to see those 5 words in connection when coming out of Roman Burki's mouth in an interview right around this time?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels good. And I know the folks who read my "Is St. Louis City SC going to lose Roman Burki" article a couple of months ago and thought this guy's an idiot. I know they're definitely unhappy seeing that, but also happy. I'm sure it's bittersweet for them. Here's the thing. We don't know anything, for certain until a contract is signed and a deal is announced, right? So while he's definitely saying St. Louis is my priority, unless there's already like a deal kind of set in place, I'm sure his agent and whoever handles his PR is, maybe even St. Louis City's PR, I'm sure it's an absolute nightmare that he said those words in a publication. Like, we're lucky as fans that we get to see that, because those are big words that carry a lot of weight, right? Should he leave, right, all of a sudden that puts a really bad look on the front office of St. Louis. If this player said publicly that he wants to stay here and then he didn't, what happened, right?
It's a really good point.
Unless there's a deal done and it's comfortable for him to say that, that's almost a little alarming. And I'm sure, the PR teams all around for the other MLS clubs he's talking to, even, I'm sure everybody's upset that he said that, because it kind of like, it puts everyone in an uncomfortable position. Now, so with that being said, I'm not convinced that this means he's going to stay in St. Louis. I'm also not convinced that it means he wouldn't go to Europe, but I think
that was a pretty definitive one. I really like it here. Really. That was directly asked about if a return to Europe is also possible. He seemed to kind of kick that one. I know it's you got to take these all with a grain of salt, but that seemed pretty definitive that he's kicking down the Europe. He mentioned wanting to travel, how his fiance is an American. She wants to go to Europe a lot. He wants to travel a bunch. So it seems like while he does have a little bit of the wanderlust, it seems like a lot of that is connected more to like travel than it is to his actual career. So, and maybe that's even less what St. Louis fans want to hear, because if you lose him, it sounds like you're going to be losing to a potential rival.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if he goes anywhere in the Western Conference, I'm sure St. Louis fans are just going to melt and fall into the ground. It's going to be absolutely tragic if that happens. Now, I will, in the same breath, say I really don't think that's really that likely, even despite everything I've seen. And I know, him saying this makes me sound almost kind of stupid for what I'm about to say, but I really think he's going to stay in St. Louis. He's going to go to Chicago if they can pay him, or he's going to end up back in Switzerland, and doing like a year or two there, being the hometown, hero, farewell tour. And then he's going to retire at 39 and go travel with his wife and potentially, his, stepchildren and future children potentially. So, I don't know. That's just my opinion, but either way, regardless of anything, the fact that he said those words, it carries a lot of weight, and it definitely is a sticky situation if those words don't turn out to be true. So this will be a very interesting storyline to follow for about the next 4 months until we probably have an answer to the question.
To your point, there is, some technical, possible gamesmanship here. It tells other people that you're in contact with, because he does say we're currently in talks with several MLS clubs. It does kind of tell them, hey, listen, if you want me, you got to come get me. It does kind of throw down the gauntlet a little bit in the discussions with other teams. Maybe they're playing things a little slow. He doesn't appreciate that, so he throws out a little bit of a toss, a little grenade into the ether to see what happens. Abo says that interview was fantastic. Lots of insight into his league experiences. I don't think he's leaving. It also is fascinating. I'll pull up one of the other big quotes that people are talking about. But yeah, look into, like I said, his departure, what went wrong, how he got tossed down. There's some interesting translations here that I have no idea how to take, because there's an idiom in here that apparently is translated from German and loses all of its context and meaning when it's translated to English. And so at one point he's called a peasant sacrifice. And so I kind of think I know what they're going for, but I feel like there's like a German idiom that got lost in translation. It really was a fascinating article. Again, just do a quick Google search of Roman Burki, SPOX, or Roman Burki, Joachim Titmore. Either way, that's going to get the article to pop up. And while we'll react to this, I'll find the other big quote from the article.
Yeah. Throwing me right into the fire there. Yeah. So, I mean, it's good stuff. You can also get good articles from people like Rock and myself on STL Sports Central. I feel like that's a good time to make that plug.
That was good. And let's Hamburglar just said, what the hell is this that I just ran into? Well, this is a weekly podcast you see on STL Sports Central. And instead of just calling it City Central Weekly, like we should have, we decided to get complicated and call it Boots on the Ground. So we're going to hear every week, and we're going to give you a little bit more of a detailed breakdown to what happened. Hence, what's going to happen here a little bit later on in the show. We're going to talk a little bit why, despite the fact that it's a great win and everyone's really positive about Nashville, the rewatch went a little bit rough for me, and I have some things that I want to point out. We're also going to talk a little bit about the debut of Falou Fall. Look forward to the Chicago matchup. Talk about some of the changeups here as the lineup finally gets healthy. They're going to have some decisions to make this week when it comes to the lineup. So we got a lot of things to talk out, Hamburglar. A lot of things to do today. A lot of city news. Right now, we're just breaking down some pretty good news overall with Roman Burki. As you can see there, the quote we got there: Burki, St. Louis is my priority. Translated from German, I do want to say maybe the priority word got a little fudged, if we're just being honest here. Cappy Girl, love to see St. Louis is my priority. Also, Cappy Girl, I hope you enjoyed the City 2 game. I was there. Will was there. And after you called me out in the post game, I really hope you were there, or I would have felt cheated in the moment. The City 2 game was a lot of fun, by the way. Nice, solid 2 points there as they win the tie shootout. Abo says sacrificial lamb is peasant sacrifice. That makes sense. That's a good heady 1-for-1 change up here. Jeremy Clemens, do we think Roman could have meant that St. Louis is priority now because he's playing for us as opposed to taking it as a priority in terms of staying? I think you can take it that way as well. I think the fact that he's willing to give the team that he's playing for right now a priority and a shot at it says probably good things about how the team's contract negotiations go right now. That tells me they're at least in his mind negotiating in good faith. He's giving them the priority to come to the table, and he's saying he's talking to them. He's saying he's talking to other teams. Yeah, I don't think this is a slam dunk in any way, shape, or form. So it's a good point by Jeremy Clemens. Context and things like that can get lost in the translation. But even just looking at the word priority, even if you take it from that context, which is completely fair, I think even that's probably a good thing going forward for St. Louis City, because this has been a rough season. And for a guy like Roman Burki, who, yeah, he wants to make his money, but I know he also he wants to win more than just the DFB Pokal as the starting goaltender for a club. And so he wants to win as well. And so getting the message across to him that we're not just going to be here for the money. We're not just here for your family, but we're here because this is a place where you can win soccer games to close out your career. I think that tells me that it still being a priority is a good sign, even if it is that context. I think it's completely fair.
I mean, it's also, this is the captain of this team. This is a guy who believes in the guys in that changing room, and obviously must be fond of the new additions, and thinks that the general manager is doing something there that can turn into a winning team in a short period of time. Obviously, he's 35 next year. It's not like he's got a ton of time left to compete and win trophies, right? So he's got to, pick and choose his battles carefully. And if he wants to stay in St. Louis, I don't think that's just a good sign for, oh, yay, we get to keep Roman Burki. I think it's a good sign of, the front office and the ownership group and our staff and just, the people around that are managing to keep a high caliber player that could go to Saudi Arabia and make, $20 million a year probably to keep him here and pay him like $2 million or less, that type of thing, in 2025 or 2026, excuse me. I mean, I think that says a lot about St. Louis and what we've got going on here. And obviously the relationships he's built with guys, in the locker room, the guys who have been here from the start, like Klaus and Leuven, and obviously the people in the front office, like Lutz Pfannenstiel. So, I think these are all really, there's so many things that tie into this. You can't just take the surface level of anything that he says in these types of interviews. You kind of have to think about the bigger picture and all the different factors that combine into a decision like this from both club and player. So definitely a lot to talk about for sure.
Abo says, Jeremy, the article goes out of its way to compliment Carolyn, even the kit men who help in training. Yeah, there was an interesting story there that I plan on asking Roman about if I get a chance to, which is he on his own dime took the kit men on a trip to Vegas, which I think is a fascinating thing. He says he never would have had that kind of a relationship with the equipment managers over in Europe. And so it's kind of a special one he has here in St. Louis. But I did think it was interesting here talking about the American mindset here in America when it comes to the game. First of all, he says it's not a big difference coming from Bundesliga. It's a completely new team in the MLS. You quickly realize there's a lot of things are simply different, not in terms of intensity or the player's willpower, but especially in terms of their individual abilities. But that didn't surprise me. It was to be expected. I think we can all know what he's talking about there. And I think this is interesting, obviously, for us. People pay a lot of attention to data and statistics. I sometimes feel like statistics are almost as valuable as the final result of the game. If that's not true, but the stats are right, sometimes you'll still somehow satisfied. I think that's a shot at the media, but also I wonder how many times like Critch has been like, guys, we could have won that game, and Burki's like screaming in the back, yeah, but we effing didn't, coach, so I don't care. Like part of me wonders how much of that is getting the soft shoe from some of the coaches. We're like, guys, we could have won that one. Yeah, I could have, should have, would have. We let up 3 goals, and I'm the goalkeeper. I'm pretty pissed off about this. So I thought that was a funny perspective from Roman Burki.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, honestly, I don't really take it as a shot at Critch, but I can definitely see what you mean there. But
because he does it too. It's not just the media. I know the people bitch about a lot about the media saying, well, they played well, but they lost anyway. That's Critch is critical of the team, but there's been a lot of, listen, we should have won this game, but we didn't. And that's not good enough. But there still is a lot of, we had the numbers, we had the field tilt, but we didn't have the goals. And I do kind of wonder if there's been some times where Burki's been like, I don't want to hear about field tilt or XG, coach. Yeah. We just lost.
No, and as a leader in the locker room, you have to advocate for the voice of the players like that. You have to be that, not just a fly on the wall in that situation, and speak up and say, I can't just let the data console me after a loss. You have to expect 3 points, week in and week out. And that's just part of being a captain. So, I think I don't know. I really think he's a good leader. I don't really think it's a shot necessarily at Critch, but I definitely see the point that Rock is making there.
I just think it's to his point. I think it's less the American way. I think if he was playing in Germany right now, he'd probably be making a comment about how German football now is a lot more torn towards stats than it was 10 years ago. I think the game has changed that way, and he just happens to be playing in St. Louis and not Germany anymore. So he's saying this is the one that sticks out to me, because I just think that's the way the game's gone, and that's how everyone looks at it. Everyone tries to put it in context and things like that. Hamburglar jumping in hot after discovering the chat function. Let him go. He isn't that good. Jeremy Clements, you don't think Burki is a top 5 keeper in the MLS? And Hamburglar says, no, look at all the weak goals that he lets in. I got to start getting better at not arguing with people that I shouldn't argue with. And people who tell me that Marcel Hartl's having a bad season and that Burki's not a top 5 keeper in the league, I got to throw my hands up and say, listen, we see the world too differently. Let's go our separate ways. There's
a lot of good keepers in MLS right now.
There are,
but Burki's absolutely a top 5 keeper.
Yes. Some of the numbers aren't nearly as good as they were in the last 2 years. It's because the last 2 years were two of the best years.
In the last 2 years, you've had the most horrific defenses. And not only that, but you've had like 20 different back fours in front of you out of 34 games each year, and 24 and 25 with the way the injuries have been. I mean, it's very difficult to not concede goals in that situation. As a keeper, there's only so much you can do. If you're dealing with the front post and you're taking the guy with the ball and you're expecting your center back to be getting the guy at the PK spot who instead is just going to tap it in, and he doesn't, you as a keeper can't do anything about that, but it goes on your record as a goal conceded, right? And so
every number tells you that he's one of the best goalkeepers. Like, exactly. You see,
and his handling and distribution is, in my opinion, the best in the league.
He's one of the best passers out of the backside as well. The numbers, again, they're down this year. They're not nearly as good as the last 2 years. We just got to be honest about that. The numbers this year put him more around a middle of the, kind of above average, 15th, 16th ranked goalie when it comes to pure shot stopping numbers. But I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, if you put up 2 of the best seasons in the last decade of the league, and then you have one season where you dealt with an injury to start things off and you're middle of the pack, I think we can all say that we can at least give him the benefit of the doubt that he's a top 10 goalkeeper when everything evens out in the end. That's all I'm saying. Yes, he's having a worse year. Hamburglar's no doubt about that, even though he didn't even say that. But he's correct that he's having more of a down year when it comes to all the numbers as a shot stopper. But he's still above average and dealing with an injury this year, dealing with a defense in front of him that was never consistent. Let's see how these numbers look when he has Falou Fall and Henry Kessler and maybe even Timo Baumgartel in front of him. That's all I would be saying. We're getting some a chat here from Abo, and I'm telling Abo, don't blow up my flip and rundown.
Yeah,
we will be getting to the injury news for this week. We like to do this SOB chronologically. The Burki stuff happened before the game last week. Now we're going to talk about the game, and then we're going to talk about the stuff that happened this week. We could do it reverse chronological, but that hurts my brain, and I don't want to do that. So we will be talking about Cedric Toyshirt, but we will get Abo's chat out here right in front. The one who is leaving is Cedric Toyshirt. Muscle fatigue is code for being put on ice, awaiting a loan/move. That's the question you guys need to ask about. Here's the thing. We'll talk about Cedric Toyshirt and being sat, but if you think I'm not going to burn one of my, you might think it's bad, but I'll just explain to you my rationale. Every practice or post game or pre-match presser, I'm usually good to get one or two questions because we don't get that many with David Critchley. And sometimes I don't get any because they put it at a time when I'm doing other STL Sports Central stuff. I don't get to ask any questions at all. So in a week, I don't get that many questions for David Critchley. And to burn one on a question where I'm going to get a bunch of coach speak and I'm not going to get a straight answer, that's not the question I'm going to ask, at least not in the public pressers.
That's giving the journalism in the press room insight right here.
I'm just saying. I'll ask some people behind the scenes, but I'm not. There's a good chance I'm not going to be able to tell you if there actually is an answer, because that's how those conversations usually happen. It's just David Critchley's not going to give his hand. First of all, this isn't his decision. It's Lutz Pfannenstiel's. Lutz isn't going to play his hand on Cedric Toyshirt, but that's why it's fun for you to do things like read between the lines and say, this team's finally getting healthy. The Cedric Toyshirt injury, when it happened, didn't seem like it was that serious to be a multi-week thing like this. So all of a sudden, why is this happening? Why is he still out? Why is it not a questionable thing? Why is it so definitive the day before? You can ask those questions. I think it's completely reasonable to read between the lines there. Cedric Toyshirt's having a terrible season. Cedric Toyshirt has been underutilized and I would argue misutilized for the majority of this entire season. They finally now have players who can play on the flank. They could have one more, but they neglect to make that roster move. But they have some players who can finally play out on the flank, including the right side. I'm not letting it die down.
Subtle shade about Makai Joyner coming.
I don't know what you're talking about. So they have the players on the flank, so they can finally move Cedric Toyshirt centrally. But is that best thing for this team overall in the balance? Because we saw them move Tomas Ostrak into the team centrally into the 10 spot, and I thought it was one of the biggest reasons why they were able to slow down Nashville for the points that they were able to, and they weren't able to even do that for long. So if you don't have a Tomas Ostrak involved with with Chris Durkin now that he's back from suspension, and Edward Leuven, I don't know if you can afford to put a Cedric Toyshirt into that 10 role, which is the one spot where he fits right now. It's the one spot in the lineup where he fits. So not only just reading between the lines, just talking about who's available, who's having a good season, and who fits for this team going forward. I don't think Abo's off on this one.
Yeah, I don't think Cedric. I will say I think the possibility of him leaving before his contract expires, which by the way, that is
blow up my
June 2026.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
okay.
You want me to save it? You want me to save it?
No. Let's talk about it now. We say in the chat that here on STL Sports Central, we let you guys control the show in the chat. So there goes my rundown. Take it away, Will. Let's talk a little bit about the roster.
Yeah, his contract goes through June of 2026. I don't think he's going to move this summer. I think that would be foolish. He's at an all-time low market value. I don't think muscle fatigue is code for him not playing. That code for him not playing is them not rostering him without him being on the injured list. Because in MLS, you get like big fines if you put a player on the injured list and they're not actually injured. You have to like do medical passes in MLS. It's very bizarre. So that being said, I don't think that's code for anything. I think that's just code for he's hurt slightly, I guess. But I do think you're not on the wrong path, though. I think him leaving makes a lot of sense, but not right now. You would do that in the winter if you're going to do it, or even potentially in the first transfer window in March or April of the regular season. And he's a high-profile player. He's a very talented player. He's a clinical finisher. And, I'm sure if I were to walk up to him tomorrow and ask him, are you satisfied, with the way things are going, you would probably punch me in the face and be like, obviously I'm not satisfied. Why are you asking me about this? So because, he's a player who's going to hold himself to a high standard. And we've seen this we haven't actually gotten a lot of press conferences out of him since he's joined the team. But the few that we have, we've seen, even in wins, he's critical of himself. He's very critical of himself. He wants to be performing at top tier at all times. And so while he was underutilized under Mellberg, or misutilized, I would say, under Mellberg, now he's kind of being underutilized, mostly because He hasn't been playing well. He's been in poor form, right? So you give him the offseason maybe. If you can move him for a good price in the offseason, take it.
And then
try and fill that slot.
To your point, though, it's his value's at its absolute lowest. So why would you try to move him?
Right, exactly. You don't want to move him now. Let him finish the season. If you get a good offer in the offseason, take it. If not, then you let him play. And his contract is not a long contract to begin with. You know, he was signed for 2 years. You know, end of 2024 through halfway of 2025. It was I mean less than halfway of 2026. It's less than 2 years. So I just don't really see him getting bought out. I don't see him getting, you know, like some giant transfer fee or anything like that right now. So wait for April, see if you can move him then if you need to. And maybe after the offseason, he's able to find his form. He comes out flying, and then you activate his option through the rest of 2026 if you so desire. So I think my face just lit up. There was a big old bolt of lightning right outside my window there. You might hear the thunder, but
okay, it's on your end, not mine. That's good. I want to get to this funny text from Hamburglar who says, "Why the hell isn't Soccer Made in Germany on anymore?" I had to do a quick Google search of Soccer Made in Germany, and it was a show that aired here in America in the late 70s through the late 80s, and it was on PBS, which is why we need PBS, by the way, and it was an hour-long show with edited highlights of games involving West German football and select international European games from UEFA. It ran from 1976 to 1983 and then 1983 to 1988. I have never heard of this in my entire life. I found an article on ESPN in 2015 that talks about how it apparently was seminal for many of the American soccer players from the 90s and things like that. I'm sorry, you throw me a random piece like Soccer Made in Germany, and it's a PBS show that was on in the 70s and 80s. I'm going to do a quick Google search and find out what the F you're talking about. So Hamburglar, congratulations. You got me on a little bit of a tangent here, just like Abo got us on a tangent about Cedric Toyshirt. We'll talk a little bit more about some lineup ins and outs because there should be things changing as we look forward to this matchup against Chicago. But before we do that, we do have to dive into a little bit of our rewatch reacts after St. Louis took down Nashville 3-1. We did it in the post game. I've seen it a lot around the city media sphere, which is everyone talking about it being a complete game, the first complete game of the season for St. Louis City SC. And I got to be honest, Will, I feel a little irresponsible for saying that in the post game because I just don't know if we can say that about a game that was just so one-sided in each of the halves. Because if you break down and you just look here, and this is from MLS Stat on Blue Sky, the look less at the passing networks. We'll get into those here in just a moment here, but just look at the field tilt or the field control map right there in the middle of your screen. Nashville's blue. That's and on the top here, the match momentum. Nashville's blue. So you can see here a fantastic first half from St. Louis City SC. There's no doubt about that. That's a lot of red, even though the ups aren't nearly as high as the ups here from Nashville, but it's a lot of blue there in the second half. So let's take a quick peek here at some of these passing networks to kind of get into just a quick visual of the fact that it was such a one-sided match. First of all, again, I'm not saying it was a bad match. I'm not saying it was a bad game overall. Obviously, when you can beat Nashville 3-1, it's not going to be. This is the passing map, again, you just saw from the first half, and then here's the one from the full match over on the right. Not too much difference. You can mainly see they didn't get it to João Klaus very often, which is one criticism I think we can levy. But you can see the three-man center midfield a little bit differently. You can also see just in the first half a little bit more 4-2-4 kind of in the attack. Whereas in the full match, you can kind of see how Ostrak was back a little bit more, and it came out more of like a 4-3-3, which is really how it looked for the majority of the match, in my opinion. But it came out more of that in the second half than the first half because, well, they were playing defense in the second half, hence why Ostrak was dropped. So overall, your thoughts before we keep diving into on the full match and first half passing networks?
Yeah, I mean, overall thoughts, I think the rewatch for me, I actually did it like don't get mad at me, Rock, but I did it like on the drive to Starkville, Mississippi. But I wasn't watching intensely, obviously. I was focusing on the road. But I was kind of watching the game in the background. And there's one player that stuck out to me as having honestly a worse performance in the rewatch than I had kind of noticed while watching the game live.
Who dat?
And I can talk about that in a little bit, but I do want to quickly highlight a player that I thought did do very well, and that's Fallu Fall. And the reason I want to bring that up right now, even though we're doing the broad, is because while we have the passing map sitting here, look who's got purple. It's Devin Padelford in the first half, going into the midfield, and it's Fallu Fall with Devin Padelford and going into the midfield in the second half. I mean, that's a great sign, right? Yeah. For Fallu Fall in his first MLS match, just coming out and dominating, being very progressive with the ball, making meaningful passes. And on top of that, in my opinion, I think he can do much better. I don't think that was the best performance he's capable of. I thought his passing was very brave, but at times he was lackadaisical. It was almost like he was a little cocky, or he was like too confident or something like that.
Well,
I think he can be a little more crisp.
He was brave. I like the word
brave.
No,
I'm not. I like the
word brave.
I like the brave, but there were a few times on the ball where he like would receive or make a pass that didn't have quite the urgency, where he just like he wasn't quite as like moving at full speed as he could have, and it led to a potential turnover. His ideas, I do not have any problem with. His ideas were fantastic. I loved every idea that he had. I like him being brave on the ball, and I like him being okay with making mistakes. But I do want to see him hit that top gear. It's his first match. Can I fully expect that of him in his first match? Probably not. So it's hard for me to dog on him. But I did want to highlight how well I felt like he did, and how this passing map, kind of reflects that. Wow, had a hard time there.
There you go. By the way, this is from our good friend over at McLackbot. He's on Blue Sky. He's also on Twitter. You can check out his Streamlit app. And here's why I wanted to go through all of these, because here's the first half, and there's the second half passing map, ladies and gentlemen. It got a little ugly in the second half, and this is why I'm a little bit worried when we talk about the second half, and why maybe calling this a complete game for St. Louis City is maybe a little bit too generous, because things fell off completely. They tried to get the ball forward. The progressing passes attempted numbers actually higher in the second half, and the completed numbers higher in the second half as well. But there's just such a lack of connection, and this is because there was a lack of possession. We can dive a little bit deeper into the second half numbers. By the way, this is a breakdown of the second half into two halves themselves. For the first 25 minutes or so, 46 to 75, and the last 25 minutes or so, 76 to 90 as well. And you can just see here, not a lot going on.
Is that Fallu Fall I'm seeing above midfield? Is that LCB? Is that what that says?
I believe it is, yes.
On the right side?
And so the shape here is a little bit harder. That's a lot less passes that are happening. Things are obviously a lot less connected and things like that, but you can still see the general shape. But you can just see how things completely evaporated around the 76th minute. They got it back a little bit. It's actually more around the 60th minute through the 80th minute where things kind of evaporate. You can see it earlier when we broke down the momentum of the game and how much Nashville just completely dominated the second half. And that's why I'm just a tad bit worried about what we might see going forward, because they didn't control the match what I wanted to see. And here's what I'm saying: 67 through 85, a little bit like, look how dead this 20-minute span of the match is here. 67 to 85. There's nothing going on here. 86 to about 104, the last 20 minutes of the game. They actually had a pretty good build up here. You can see they went very deep. They're going to put 6-7 bodies into their defensive half. They're going to put 3 bodies up high to maybe control the ball a little bit. So they actually closed the game fairly well, but it's 67 to 85. This 20-minute span here, things got really bad really fast. And then going back to look at the first half, you can see why the first half was a little bit better. But again, even so, this 20-minute span compared to this 20-minute span, a lot less control in the game in the second half of the first half and in the second half of the second half. So it's kind of been the flip side. A lot of times in St. Louis City, they've come out slow to start both halves. This time, they came out and started both halves really well, but they completely lost it going forward. And that is a little alarming, because while it's finally a switch up of what we've been seeing, this is the kind of team that if they lose games late, their system is kind of exacerbated by that. So I'm a little bit worried by seeing such bad play from St. Louis City in the back half of both the halves.
Yeah, one thing I do want to mention, though, is when those passing maps get thin, obviously, like Rock mentioned, it implies a lack of possession, right? And the reason you don't have a lot of possession a lot of times is probably because you're playing defense, right? And why are you playing defense? because Nashville's starting to actually move the ball a little bit. But I would still say it's kind of a complete performance, even if you're playing defense, because you're up 3-0. You have no reason to be pushing numbers up the pitch. Obviously I'd love to see more possession, because when you're
only up, they're only up
a goal, but
they're only up, they're not up on this left one. And that's my thing, is they're not up yet in this left one. And it's not necessarily the thinness of the lines. Look at just the amount of different lines, the amount of different interplay in the first 23 minutes of the game. Look at the next 20 minutes and how much more static, and it's left back to left midi to left defensive midi, instead of there being a lot of the switches, crosses, switching of the play, those kind of things that we're seeing in the first 23 minutes. It's slowed down a little bit in that 35 to 45 range, not necessarily 25 to 35, but in that 35 to 45 range. And then again, you saw it in that 65 to 85 range. You saw things just peel back a little bit, and that's problematic for City going forward. And one of the things that we've been talking about a lot, and that I talked about this week, about the one thing that really helped them into this game, is Tomas Ostrak. There he is, like I said, dropping him deeper, going away from the 4-2-3-1 into more of a 4-3-3. I think that was absolutely huge for St. Louis City in this game against Nashville. But the reason why it's necessary is because they have so many problems in their central midfield. To that point, this is the one big stat that I'm going to break down for or the one big picture that I'm going to show everyone on this screen here, is this play right here. We're in the stoppage time, so this is when things are getting a little slower. Sometimes people aren't running as fast as you want them to. And here's what we're going to look at. Here's Hani Mukhtar. Here's Fayu Fall. You got Surridge off screen here, and Fayu Fall is kind of trying to split Surridge and Mukhtar. Alfie Morales ran with Hani, although he didn't do a very good job, because there is kind of a window here where they could put a cross in. But he ran with Hani to go deep. Timo's out here wide. Orozco's out here wide. He's got a man here. Orozco's watching the ball. And here's what happened: is a lot of the time St. Louis City was using the fact that they had three people in the central midfield to overload the sides with one or two of the guys, because that still meant they had one person centrally. Usually when they overload with two players, like we saw with those Volum and Ostrak games, or the Volum or the Ostrak and Leuven games a couple weeks ago, they would overload with both center middies, and then they had nobody in the central midi to cover it. Well, now they could overload with two and then still have one, or they could overload with one of them and they'd still have two. And so in most cases, this works pretty well. But Alfie's here on Hani. Fayu Fall's got to play this. These guys are all matched up. Here's Tomas Ostrak. He's watching the ball. Here's Edward Leuven. And no one is watching this man right here. And so this is one of the, and obviously what happens, it's an easy pass right here. And then he gets a shot off goal. It's not bad, because you have Alfie here. He's able to recover. Fayu recovers. But this is what created a lot of the only issues that Nashville had, was, again, the central midfield. When it actually got stretched out and let these huge gaps in between the lines, Nashville had no problem taking advantage of it. And so it's a good thing that they were able to use Tomas Ostrak in this fashion to clog up the midfield. The problem is that even while using him in this fashion, they still had mistakes like this. Now, the big question we'll get into when we talk about Chicago is, does getting back Conrad Volum and Chris Durkin solve these kind of issues? I'm not entirely sure.
Well, one thing it does give you is a workhorse and a big physical presence in that midfield that you don't necessarily get with Alfie. He's a 35-year-old, distributor. He's not really your brute force hit people guy like a Chris Durkin, or your psycho run around like crazy guy like Conrad Volum. So you're going to get a vastly different profile when you have one of them next to Edward Leuven. So I'm not sure that you get necessarily a fix, but you get something different.
Yeah, you're right about that. You get something different. You get somebody who's also has a tendency sometimes to run a little high. But I think there was a lot of moments in that game where Perez and Mukhtar were able just to sit in between the lines, and City had bodies making it problematic, but they were still able to slice those passes through the middle. That's the worrisome part with St. Louis City, that even when they added a body, the same exact issues that we talked about kept happening. Now, they added the body, and a lot of those issues were few and far between, and a lot of them came in late moments, like I'm talking about here in the last 10 minutes of the first half and in a late 20-minute span in the second half. They weren't able to consistently build on them. You were able to take a lot of moments away from Nashville. There was a lot of times where you were able to bait them into getting the ball out wide, and then all of a sudden you had 6 or 7 bodies just clogging up the middle, and they couldn't do anything about it. And as we move forward to looking at the Chicago reaction, they're probably not going to be able to do that because Chicago has some stars who play out on the wing, and so that's going to be a little bit tricky. Any last?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very different match.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Nashville loves to take it right up the gullet. Chicago likes to take it down the flanks, right? And so we're going to see, a different game plan this weekend against Chicago. But the one thing I do want to say is when you're playing a team like Nashville or any team really in the MLS, it's unrealistic to expect a perfect performance where there's no, quality chances against your team. Now, the debate is, how do you handle those moments? Critch talks about the reaction and what you do. He says in them moments because, the whole overseas thing. It's like,
give me a break.
In them moments. And I don't know. He cracks me up. Anyway, love Critch. Got to take a chance to poke some fun at him though. But in those moments, how do you react? How do you handle those, right? In the moment you just showed, they forced, what ended up being a very, very low XG shot. And when you have a good goalkeeper in net, you can live with that. If they score a Golazo, unbelievable, then sometimes you just have to say, damn, that sucks. And you got to take that one, but you got to go and score 2 of your own. So if they can continue to limit, now, obviously the profile against, we're going to talk about in a minute with Chicago, they have to do it very differently. But if they can still limit, how many quality chances that are really, really threatening the opponent can have, I'm happy with that. As long as they can continue their offensive firepower, maintain scoring 2-3 goals a match, because obviously they're conceding one a match. It's been forever since they've gotten a clean sheet.
Well,
so you got to score to win.
Bringing up the offensive, balance and the trade-off is actually why I'm a little worried, because they didn't, for the most part, generate a lot of touches in the opponent's box. They didn't generate a lot of super high quality XG chances. They just, for the first time this season, they actually finished any XG chance relative. I mean, they just haven't finished any low XG chances this season, and they finished a couple average or low ones.
Klaus's hat trick.
Besides Klaus's hat trick. So they haven't finished any, low or average XG shots. It's been mostly the good or the great ones, and even those ones they finished at a below average level. We talked about that a few weeks ago here on the podcast. So they finally finished in a game where they weren't generating a lot of shots, and I have to think that a lot of the reason we saw it in the passing maps, not a lot of connection to João Klaus. He only had, I think, 22 touches. Marcel Hartl, when he did touch the ball, was able to make an impact, but he had one of his lowest touch counts of the entire season.
That's the player I was going to mention at the start when I said there was one player in the rewatch that bugged me in the rewatch of just didn't have as good of a performance as I thought he did, and that was Cello.
Oh, see, looking at the stat line made me think his game was total dog shit. Watching the game, I actually think that Cello did a lot of good things. It's just they couldn't get the ball to him at any point. And
that's
that
the problem. And he's also did nothing defensively. If he's going to play the left wing role, he needs to do more defensively. He did nothing defensively.
Yeah,
that was the part that bothered me.
I have no problem with him not having a good defensive game. That's not what I'm watching from him. I need them to get the ball to him and let him go to work. And I have to think that some aspect of the midfield play is connected to a lack of offense, because one of the other benefits of the midfield play is that they were able to rotate Morales, Ostrak, and Leuven to the point where Leuven was playing higher than he's played really this entire season. And while he had a solid game, obviously had the assist on the Klaus goal. It was an incredible play. Leuven playing higher did not correlate to a game where they got one of the highest amount of touches or a lot of huge chances, or he didn't get a lot of beautiful balls into the box. Obviously they had success, but if we're going to keep talking about how do they play this in the large scheme of things, we have to move past a game where they finally finished low chances and look at, did they generate enough? And in the first half, they only touched the ball 8 times in the opposition, but they had 2 goals. That's never going to happen the rest of this season. It's going to happen maybe once every year where you have that kind of first half. So I need to see more balance from this team. Chicago is going to be a great test as we move forward to kind of breaking down the Chicago game and what we learned this weekend moving forward into the Chicago game. The Chicago game is going to be a great test, because can they find a way to take away Chicago's flank dominance? Can they find a way to do that without
deal with Hugo Kuipers?
Deal with Hugo Kuipers. I actually think Zinkernagel is going to be the bigger issue potentially for St. Louis City SC. But can they
underrated player, by the way, very underrated player?
Can they take away the defensive issues while not hurting themselves on offense? Can they find the balance? I think that's still the biggest question with St. Louis City going forward every week. It's not just are they improving, which is a huge question going forward. They also have to answer the question of can they find the balance? Because I don't think they've answered it yet.
No, I mean, I agree. I don't think they've had a match that's convinced me that they've played a perfect match. Now, again, like I said, I still think they played like a complete 90, but it wasn't a complete, like, it wasn't quality. It wasn't
I'm not expecting
quality
perfect
for 90 minutes, but
I'm not expecting perfect. But you cannot allow a team to just completely control a game for a 25, 30-minute period to the point where even with a 2 or 3 goal lead, you're thinking, this game's not completely out of hand yet. Like, that was the level that Nashville controlled the game from 65 to 85, where you were like, this is getting a little worrisome. That's the kind of, consistency and put a nail in the coffin that you really need to do going forward. One of the big parts about doing that is going to be the continued play of João Klaus. And before we get into some of the takeaways from training, I just want to dive into a quick little graphical breakdown. I did a João Klaus because I took a look at him with our friend at McLackbot, his wonderful breakdowns when you kind of can look at players with different profiles. This is the one on the left is him as a regular forward. The one on the right is him as a target forward. It just highlights some of the different stats that you can look at to talk about how good a player is. And so right here, I just have circled a couple of the stats where you see Klaus is one of the highest above average players at his position. Self-created shot percentage, I think people would be shocked by that number. He gets off shots at a high level. Let me move the graphic here so people can see the entirety of everything going on here. Interceptions plus tackles, obviously going to be one of the highest levels there. Touches in opponent's penalty area, progressive passes. All of these header numbers are some of the highest in the entire league. Non-penalty goals this season with I think it's 7, 8 MLS. I think it's 8 goals against MLS teams.
2 Open Cup.
Yes, 2 Open Cup. One of them was an MLS team, so I still count that one. So João Klaus having a good game, but it's not all great. There have been some aspects we have to look at that are a little bit disappointing. His non-penalty XG and non-penalty XG per shot, not great. And the assist numbers and the creation numbers just aren't what you would expect from him. He still has this in his bag, but it just hasn't materialized at any point. No assists. The X assist is low. The open play shots created for others,
I think this comes down to 2 players not doing a whole lot in terms of putting balls in the net.
I know one of them.
Yeah, I bet you know
them. Mr. Bratton, can I answer one?
Yeah, Rock, go ahead.
Cedric Toyshirt.
Do you know who the other one is?
No.
It can be, depending on who's on the pitch, it could be Simon Betcher, it could be Cello. Because Cello has scored from open play in all of his goals he scored this season. He hasn't scored from any kind of really combination plays. Like, he's just blown by players and just like scored left-footed cannons and scored a backdoor header for some reason. Like, those have been his goals lately. I want to see him being underneath Klaus and being, letting Klaus do his thing and create opportunities for a guy like Cello to just take a touch and just rip it. I think that's part of the reason Klaus's stats are lower than those stats.
There's people who wanted to get rid of this guy at this time last year.
Dude, I think we're past this now, where I think it's okay to look back and laugh at everybody who was so insistent on João Klaus being a terrible player that had to get shipped elsewhere, and he was terrible and he didn't score goals. He's a fantastic player.
He absolutely is a fantastic player, and he's going to have to come up big for St. Louis City SC because to find that balance, he's arguably one of the best defensive players, definitely one of the best offensive players. He's going to have a big game. They're going to have to get the ball to his feet more. He's also going to have to be active in the press. He was very active in the press throughout that Nashville game. I don't care if he touches the ball 20 times. He's making a bigger impact than that. Let's get into some of the things from training. In fact, let's dive right into it. We're talking about how different things are going to be this week against Chicago compared to Nashville. Here's David Critchley talking exactly about that.
Their threat will come from the wider areas. Nashville were very good at playing central, very good with Hani and Surridge in the central areas. So we adjusted to those tactics pretty well as a team. We've identified similar situations, but in different personnel in different areas. Nothing I want to give away too much, of course, but definitely identified where their strengths are in the attack. We've tried to combat it now with a good setup defensively. So we're aware of their danger players, and we just want to remain to understand that they can't have time and space in our final third.
So the big thing there that we just talked about, that David Critchley mentioned there, they needed to take away the middle of the field, and they were comfortable with pushing Nashville to the flanks. There's a lot of times where you saw, again, Nashville had their fullbacks with entire just fields of green around them with not a single red jersey anywhere, and they weren't able to do anything because of all the red jerseys on the defensive side. Well, not so much of an issue for the Chicago Fire. They're one of their best players, arguably their best player, and their most important contributor as a passer is Philip Zinkernagel, who plays on that right wing. So he gets the ball into Hugo Kuipers at a high level, 14 goals this season for Kuipers. So we know the central midfield is going to be a big thing, but not something the city's going to have to worry about as much, as there's a good chance that we're going to see all three of Fall, Baumgartel, and Kessler at the center back spot. But Philip Zinkernagel, like we just talked about, he's dangerous. He operates against the left side of your defense. So looking forward to this game coming up on Saturday, Will Bratton, how do they slow down that right wing threat from the Chicago Fire?
Yeah, you put Marcel Hartl at the 10, and you put someone who can be defensively responsible at the left wing, and let Sangbin and give Sangbin a responsibility and remind him, hey, this is a specific match where we need you to stay a little wider in rest defense and make sure you're handling this wing threat that Chicago poses, because Critch was saying, you can't give them time and space in the final third. And he's not talking, obviously it's obvious when you say you don't want to give a player time and space in front of your goal. But when he says the final third, he's also meaning down the flanks in the final third, because that's where they're extremely dangerous. And we've, for those who haven't watched any of Chicago's matches this year, all you have to do is go pull up some of their goal highlights, and you're going to see the majority of them come from these situations in open play. They're a very, very threatening team down the flanks. And so you need to have an extra body in the box so that you can free up your trees and Fallu Fall and Timo Baumgartel, Henry Kessler, whoever's in there, to be free to go win aerial duels. So you need that extra body sitting in deep. That's a defensive mid when you're in that rest defense. And you need to, if you're going to let them get space wide, then you really need that extra body, so you can just let your center backs deal with the aerial threat. And Roman Burki probably going to play high off his line in this match too, in terms of when they do have the ball on those flanks and just try and pluck those crosses out of the air. Those are really the best ways to deal with a team like that is can you just get in their way physically so they can't do anything with the balls they're able to get in, because they will get crosses in against St. Louis. The question is, do they find any heads of Chicago players that can finish anything, and can St. Louis effectively clear the ball and manage that threat and limit those wide players from having the space to cut inside and create those short little slot passes that result in tap-ins, basically. So that's kind of the defensive responsibility.
So you have to cover your flanks more, obviously. So we look at the wide tens. We look at the fullbacks. Obviously, Jonathan Bamba, a very good left wing as well for the Chicago Fire. He's going to be tricky, but let's focus on that right side for the Chicago Fire. So let's look at the left side of the city defense. We've seen them get up higher on the left side with Devin Padelford over the last few weeks, and with Hazy Orozco for that matter, than they had previously. It used to be pretty unbalanced, very high right, and they'd shift back to a back three when they were playing a back four with the two center backs and the left back. Now things get classical, more up both sides with both of their fullbacks. Do we see a change there? Do we see Padelford get the start again? What do you think happens with those fullback spots?
I think it's going to be Padelford. I think you want that speedy, larger physical body. And I think Orozco might start at right back again. It's definitely possible. I think Conrad Vollum starting there maybe is more likely because he's so quick and can keep up with those kind of flank runs. And, his job isn't necessarily to stop that player from dribbling down the line. It's just to make sure he can't go anywhere with the ball. Don't let him get a cross off. Don't let him get any of those slot passes through. Just kind of contain that player. Let him dribble himself into a corner and do nothing, because we have, ways that we can deal with that type of thing. So I think Conrad Vollum there actually makes a lot of sense. This is really a match that doesn't suit Tomas Totland very well. So I wouldn't be shocked
Conrad
to see
Vollum
him
either.
again. I mean, I would argue it suits him better than Tomas Totland or Hazy Orozco.
I mean,
we don't have a super defensive right back on this team.
Yeah, but like
you need someone who's quick and physical, and Conrad Volum's that guy.
Yeah, but Totland's a right back. Conrad Volum's not to his own. I mean, he even admits that.
Yeah,
and my thing is that
wrong, but
one of the reasons with playing Conrad Volum at right back has worked is because they've used him in that inverted wing, in that inverted fullback way where they add him to the midfield. So is that the way they get the extra body into the midfield? But then you are literally taking a man off the flank to overload the midfield. That doesn't seem like it's something that actually works for the game plan against Chicago. That's why I think
that's not really what I think.
But what does work,
inverted fullback.
What does work with Conrad Volum against Chicago is needing to have an extra person who's ready to shift out to that wing spot from the center midi spot, as we keep talking about. If Hazy or Padelford's going to get high on either of the sides, consistently having center middies who are going to cover your back line, who are going to cover that back area, that helps. And so instead of using Volum from the fullback to the midfield spot, I think it makes sense in the kind of reverse when we were kind of talking about Hackworth. Why does center midi and fullback work so well in this system? I think you actually do the opposite. I think maybe because you need so much static play from the midfield this time, they can't get pulled over. You need their bodies in there so you don't get overloaded on those crosses. I would start Conrad Volum in the center midfield with Leuven, and I would start Chris Durkin on the bench.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean,
he roams so much.
Here's my concern. When Leuven drops in, and it has to be the guy to take, the man, so that Fall and Kessler or Baumgartel can be dealing with the aerial threat. He's not going to do that as much. I don't think he's going to be as effective at doing that. He usually plays the top of the blocks in those defensive situations. So if Conrad Volum, if you're six, is going and covering Tots because Tots is way up the pitch, then you're just down in the midfield. You have the same problem.
I think it's Hazy, and I don't think they play as aggressive on the wings. But the issue then, we were just talking about balance. If they're not getting up on the wings, that's where the width comes from in this offense. And so if you're not getting high on the wings with Yazi and Padelford, we don't have the big switch from the opposite fullback spot that we've been seeing a lot, whether it's Timo going to the left side or Fall going to the right side. We don't have that switch anymore happening as much because they're not high anymore. So like, where does the City offense come if they don't keep pushing up the flanks like they have been with the fullbacks? That's where this balance conversation again comes in.
Yeah, I think ironically, like you need Ostrak in that situation. You need a guy who can get the ball and just cut past three guys like a crazy man, and then distribute to a Cello or a Klaus or a Sangbin, who can move you up the pitch. So it's definitely a game of chess here, because no matter who you go with, you're going to gain and lose.
You know what would really work?
What's that?
5-man back.
Yes, this is actually a match that Olaf Paul was designed for, believe it or not.
I mean, imagine if you had just stick Timo in the middle, and then stick Fayu and Henry on each side of him. Now you can get a little bit wide because you have Henry and Fall who cover so much ground themselves. This is a great back five game. Too bad we only play a back four on this team.
Well, you know what? Critch had always mentioned, or he did mention like 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think, that he likes the 4-2-3-1, but sometimes certain matchups call for different formations. This could be a bad. I'm playing. This is not going to happen, but
I would absolutely love it. It's not going to happen, but I'd love it. Let's keep rolling on from some things we got from training. Let's hear from the man who debuted just this past Saturday. Here's Falu Fall talking about the type of player that he thinks he can be for St. Louis City SC.
I can say like I'm good with the ball, and I want to bring the line and just help my teammate. Like if I have to play long ball, if I have to play short and everything, that's why like at the first time I say I have to build something up, because like in the game I see like I lose like many ball, and that things is I have it to me, and I think for if I build that things up, I can be like one of the best defender in the league, because I'm good in defending. If I have that things extra, it will be amazing for me.
I love the confidence from Falu Fall. I can be one of the best in the league. He knows he's a good defender. If he can bring that passing and those extra parts of his game that he showed in Norway, if he can bring that to his defending here in the MLS, he thinks he can be one of the best defenders in the league. Get on with it, young man. I absolutely love the confidence.
Yeah, no, I think I said in the post-match, and I know I've said it at various other places as well, that I really think that in 2026 he could be a strong candidate for Defender of the Year when it's all said and done, assuming he doesn't earn some massive contract transfer by then, because that's very possible as well. And while it would suck, I mean, if you can take like a giant check, why not? Like, just go for it. To be fair, finding a left-footed center back, I mean, they don't grow on trees. They're very hard to find. Obviously, we've seen really just left-footed left backs and left-footed center backs are really like the hardest players to find in the market in general. So, and I think I also said that on the post game too. So, you know, there's definitely a balance to it of like, what do you want to do? How can you maximize, you know, using this player that you just signed while also, you know, getting profit in the long term. But that's not the point here. The point is, I think in 2026, Fall genuinely could have a real case for Defender of the Year. You know, having a full season. He's going to already be experienced in MLS with like 10 matches or something like that in total, I believe. And then the match, you know, against Villa, I guess he's familiar with the team. I really think it'll be good.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I'm excited for Falu Fall. I'm excited to bring you guys more of these moments from him at the press conferences. I'm excited to break down more tape from Falu Fall because I thought he was special. If you can see it on what I tweeted out, I was able to actually join Channel 2 and do a little bit of video breakdown. And a couple of the plays we got to break down about Falu Fall were incredible, including, I don't have it here because we can't use it, but that play late in the game where he's on Surridge and he picks up Hani's run and the cross goes over his head to Surridge, and he's so tall that he's still able to pick up and make the header to clear the ball. So he covers Surridge, then he covers Mukhtar, and then he wins the header as he's covering both of them at the same time. Falu Fall is going to be absolutely incredible, and I can't wait for us to see him more going forward. One thing we got to do before we go is talk about this Chicago matchup just a little bit more. First of all, I have one quick question. Where the hell is Bridgeview? The game's not at Soldier Field. It's at some place called Bridgeview, wherever the hell that is in Chicago. I don't really care. I just want to get
no idea.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't really care. Quick little look at these two teams since just in the the Critchley era, by the way. So we're just going back to May for both of these teams. And I broke down these little things so you guys can see some of these plays. City right here, you can see open play offense with these two stats, open play defense with these two, chance creation, we have shots conceded, passing and pass types, possession, long ball percentage, cross percentage of box entries. Here are your pressing numbers if you want to look at those kind of things. Here's how the team fouls, your dribbles, and your offside. So this is a breakdown of both of these clubs, and you can see Chicago Fire, better offensive team. Both teams struggle a little bit defensively. The chance creation is a little bit better on the Chicago side. Neither of these teams very good when it comes to a possession factor, using long balls well, or getting crosses into the box. St. Louis City a little bit better in all facets than Chicago in that one. Pressing, neither of these teams is very good at that factor. And again, this is only in the Critchley area. These are all Critchley numbers. There's no Olaf Melberg sitting back and not wanting to press in this breakdown. This is all David Critchley numbers. The PPDA still very low for David Critchley, a little bit higher for Chicago. The pressing, the final third tackles, higher for Chicago, almost double of what City's putting out. So a lot better there percentage-wise. The percentiles double, I should say. A lot of dribbles from Chicago. This is Zinkernagel and Kuipers and Bamba right here in all of these dribbles that you see from Chicago. They're a very good team there. This is why when you talk about this game, this is a fantastic game for St. Louis City because this is a defense that they can beat. Look at the open play defense numbers for Chicago. They're not very good. This is a team you can get the ball out in front and score against, but can you score without getting ripped apart on the back end because they are a better offensive team than you are. They have dangerous dribblers. They have dangerous passers. They're a dangerous team all around offensively. Can they find the right balance? That's going to be the quick question in Bridgeview, wherever the hell that is.
Yeah, I think this is a team where with a shakier back line, you want to get the press going a little bit higher, a little bit earlier in this match. Right off the jump, come out with a higher press. Don't let them get comfortable. Don't let them get the ball down the flanks and do what they do. See if you can knock one in early before before either team's even settled into the match. I think that's an ideal situation if you just come out pretty warm, but in the same breath, you don't want to come out, extinguish yourself, and then get scored on twice at the end of the first half and go down 2-0 in halftime if you weren't able to score early. So
one final thing, because you talked about getting Marcel Hartl out of that left 10 spot because of the defensive responsibilities. We talked a little bit about the fullbacks. We talked about the center midfield. How do you deploy your attacking four? How do you get a better defensive player into that left 10 spot so that you're feeling a little bit more confident on slowing down Zinkernagel and company?
Yeah, I mean, you can put in Celio Pompeu if you want him to just to get the ball and dribble. If you don't want Padelford going as high in this match, which in my opinion, you really shouldn't want him going as high. If you get him to pass up to Celio Pompeu and he can just turn and dribble, that's okay. Obviously, he hasn't been playing that great in his last handful of matches, but I think this is a match that kind of suits his profile. It's a very dribble down the flanks match for both clubs, in my opinion. I mean, the center backs aren't great for the Chicago Fire, and St. Louis has good center backs. So you want to Chicago go down the flanks. If you're Chicago, you want to get down those flanks, and that's your bread and butter anyway. So
I know people.
I think Pompeu could work here, but you have to have him disciplined. He has to know what his responsibilities are.
I know people are down on Celio Pompeu, and you mentioning that he has to be disciplined is what I'm getting at, because the numbers don't tell you he presses a lot well, but no, the numbers don't tell you anybody on that left side presses very well from St. Louis City. But watching the games, Celio Pompeu does a very good job of tracking back defensively. So much to the point that in the first handful of matches that Critchley did, not the first ones, but in that middle handful of matches that Critchley was coaching, they were consistently dropping Celio Pompeu onto the left side to help out whoever it was who was playing left back. At this point, it was who was playing left back consistently before Padelford got here.
Jay Reed.
Jay Reed, yes, that's what it is. So Celio Pompeu was consistently tracking back every play. While Totland was the only guy up the right side, and Totland was doing the entire job up and down the left flank, entirely just him, because we talked a lot about what the right wingers were doing. Right. On the left side, Celio Pompeu was consistently tracking all the way back to help out Jay Reed with his assignment, and then getting forward and being one of the main attackers. So I know the numbers aren't great. You don't have to buy me. You don't have to believe me anyhow. I'm just saying every minute of this team that I've watched this year, for the most part, when it comes to wingers, Celio Pompeu has done a better than average job of tracking back and getting his nose in defensively. So I'm with you on that point. Start Celio on the left side, move Hartl back into the middle. I don't know exactly what they're going to do in the central midfield. I think they could go anyway. Same thing with the fullbacks. Either way, I think we will see a change. Even if the personnel's similar, even if it's not what I agree with, I think we're going to see a less aggressive team from the fullback spots on the flanks. And I think we could see a huge game from Marcel Hartl and Edward Leuven in the middle of the pitch.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. You hit the nail on the head. Those are the most important things to watch against Chicago this weekend and in Bridgeview, I guess. But the second most important thing to watch to the match is the STL Sports Central City.
Oh, you stole my transition, you son of a... You stole my transition.
I'm just too good, Rock. I'm too good. You got to tune in with Matthew Rocchio and myself here on STL Sports Central. We're going to be breaking it down Saturday night after hopefully 3 points, extinguishing the fire in Bridgeview, I guess.
Will never played volleyball. Will, you can't set the ball to yourself. You set the ball.
Wait, what do you
set the ball to? You set the ball to the spiker. You set the ball to the spiker. Come on, Will. Jesus. Thought you were going to set me up with this beautiful. I won't stand
for this.
Just toss it up in the air, and I was going to crush it. And you just said, "This is fungo, baby."
I said I was going to take it.
This is throwing. Hit yourself. This is Will just throwing him up to himself and just hitting him away, just in the batting cage, waiting for something right down the middle. And Will takes it himself. He's right. That's what you should be watching. That's how you hit the nail on the head there. That's what you should be watching, which is the STL Sports Central post game. I'm very mad at you for stealing that from me, but you know what? It was artfully done. It was well done.
Thank you. I'll be here all week.
We will be here on STL Sports Central for the post game. Before we go and finish up boots on the ground, quick predictions. What do you think happens up in Chicago?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I think Chicago's a really good team. I think City are going to struggle on the road. But there's always the possibility with the way this team looks right now, and especially with how shaky Chicago's defense has been through the majority of the season. I think the possibility of them winning is absolutely there. But I wouldn't put money on it. I think I'm going to go with a 2-1 loss. I think Chicago, they're going to have a very hard time keeping a clean sheet, despite how good Chris Brady has been for them. But I also don't think St. Louis are going to be able to shut down that Chicago attack that's been, lethal for in a very strong Eastern Conference, by the way. I mean, this is no slouch of a team, and the Eastern Conference in general has just been very good.
Have you said any numbers? Have you said any numbers? Yeah, I got lost there. Did you say any numbers?
Yeah, 2-1.
All right, that's 2-1 loss.
2-1 loss.
Oh, Will Bratton, I thought I was going to go more negative than you. I'm going 2-2 draw for St. Louis City SC this weekend up in Chicago. Can they find the balance between the offense and the defense? Clearly, me and Will say kinda, I guess is our answer. We'll be here on STL Sports Central to talk all about it. St. Louis City, it could be a big one for them. David Critchley fighting for the head coach job still. St. Louis City still technically fighting to get into that 9 spot and make it into the playoffs. They're not mathematically eliminated, but they have to play a lot better. They have to improve this. But shut up!
You said the P word.
No, I don't care. I'm just going to keep on rolling. I don't care that I said it. I hate myself for it. They're not eliminated yet. Playing a good game and finding actual balance against Chicago will be a huge thing in me actually ever using the P word again. If they draw or lose this game, I'm done, Will. I don't care about mathematically eliminated. And at that point, we're going to have to talk about what happens in 2026 on the sidelines and on the bench, because at some point you have to win games. Everyone's healthy except for Cedric Toyshirt. You got to go out and win this one. So if either of us are correct, I'm going to be pretty critical of things on Saturday, because you just can't keep lollygagging through this season. I'd be a little bit different if they were giving 40 minutes to Mekhi Joyner, but I don't think that's going to happen because he's out of appearances and they haven't made any roster changes. So they have to see some real, actual, tangible changes with the people on the roster now, because apparently we're not looking towards 2026 just yet. So prove me wrong. Keep looking towards 2025 and win this game in Bridgeview against the Chicago Fire. We'll be here on STL Sports Central for the postgame. No matter what happens with St. Louis City SC, they face off again against the Chicago Fire this Saturday evening. So come here around 9 p.m., maybe around more like 9:30 p.m. We'll be right here for the postgame to talk about the match, no matter what happens. And hopefully, to Cappy Girl's point, we're both wrong. For Will Bratton, I'm Matthew Rocchio. This has been Boots on the Ground. Have a great night, St. Louis.